Emotional crisis is often treated as a disaster to be avoided. Yet the core philosophy of Joe Bandel's The Oak Matrix Unleashed suggests that these moments of intense fear and pain are actually the fundamental engines of personal evolution. According to the text, particularly in chapter 23, the crushing weight of an emotional crisis isn't a sign of failure, but a signal that desire has finally collided with reality. This collision is where the real work of transformation begins.
It's a complete reframing of how we look at discomfort. In the OAK matrix, Bandel argues that we've been conditioned to see duality as a conflict, a sort of war between opposites like fear and joy. But he proposes a different model, duality as a loving embrace. Instead of fear being something we fight, it becomes the containing feminine force that grounds our instincts. It works in harmony with the masculine, expansive drive of desire. When those two meet, you don't get a breakdown, you get a breakthrough. It's similar to how an oak tree handles a storm. It doesn't just survive the rain, it channels that intensity into deeper roots and higher growth. The crisis becomes the fuel.
That oak tree analogy is vital because it moves us away from the idea of passive growth. You don't just sit there and hope things get better. Bandel is clear that growth requires active engagement. He mentions that emotional pain often feels more acute than physical pain. Heartbreak or rejection can cut deeper than a physical bruise. But the flip side is that emotional highs like love and success are what make life worth living. If we try to avoid the lows by playing it safe, we inadvertently cut ourselves off from the peaks. You can't have one without the other.
That aligns with what we see in modern psychology regarding post-traumatic growth. A study published in the journal Nature and research by psychologists like Richard Tedeschi suggests that individuals who face significant life crises often report a greater appreciation for life and increased personal strength. Bandel takes this a step further by calling it emotional mastery. He's saying that every time you feel your heart pounding or your throat tightening before a big moment, whether it's asking for a promotion or confronting a loss, you're at a crossroads. You can freeze, which is the natural instinct, or you can use your willpower to override that instinct and push forward. That act of pushing through is what builds competence.
He makes an interesting point about the difference between a victim and an adventurer in this stage. Earlier stages of the OAK matrix, like the spiritual and mental crises, are more about observation and learning. You're almost a student of your own life. But once you hit the emotional stage, passivity has to end. You're no longer just watching, you're acting. And because you're often acting despite inexperience, he admits it's going to be clumsy. You might fail, you might get rejected, but he argues that rejections are actually educational. They refine your approach and build empathy.
And that education has a very physical component. Bandel references military training to show how humans react under stress. When a crisis hits, the body doesn't rise to the occasion, it sinks to the level of its training. He gives the example of a mother who might freeze while her child is in danger versus a trained guard who jumps in without thinking. The guard isn't fearless, they've just honed their instinct through practice. In the same way, he suggests we need to train for emotional crises. We should role-play difficult conversations or visualize our fears as fuel. If we don't prepare, fear becomes paralysis. If we do, it becomes prowess.
It seems he's challenging the nirvana principle that Freud talked about, the idea that we just want to return to a state of zero tension. Bandel is saying that a life without tension is boring and stagnant. He actually claims that if we don't choose risks for our dreams, nature will eventually breed self-made crises for us, just to get us moving again. It's a no pain, no gain philosophy, but applied to the soul. You mentioned the loving embrace of opposites earlier. How does that specifically manifest when someone is feeling terrified?
It's about integration. Think about the physical response to fear. The racing heart, the adrenaline dump. Usually we label that as bad, but in the OAK matrix, that adrenaline is seen as the generative fire. It's the energy you need to change your reality. When you embrace the fear, you're essentially saying, I feel the containing grip of my instincts, and I'm going to use that grounding to launch my expansive desire. It bridges the gap between the astral insights, what we want, and the physical manifestation, what we actually do. It's the moment the master within takes control of the steering wheel.
But isn't there a risk of being reckless? If we're always chasing the high of the crisis, don't we just become adrenaline junkies? He seems to advocate for a specific kind of risk, not just random danger.
Correct. It's about true will. Bandel isn't suggesting you jump off a bridge for the sake of it. He's talking about risks that align with your deepest desires. If you want a new friendship, the risk is inviting someone out and facing potential rejection. That rejection isn't a failure of the system. It's a data point. It's part of the reality principle, where mental plans meet physical limits. The excitement comes from that clash. He ends the chapter by saying, "What an exciting place to be if we can make it work." He sees the struggle itself as the adventure.
It's a very proactive stance. He even provides tools like a crisis journal. Instead of just venting about how much a rejection hurts, he wants you to log what it taught you. He wants you to track the highs that came from risks you were afraid to take. It turns the emotional low into a research project for your own growth. And he suggests a willpower ritual, literally breathing in the fear and breathing out the action. It's very somatic.
It has to be somatic because emotions are raw and vivid. They aren't just thoughts, they're pulses. If you look at the history of the phrase, "no pain, no gain," it was popularized by Jane Fonda in the 80s for physical fitness, but the concept goes back to Hesiod and Sophocles. Sophocles wrote in Electra that nothing truly succeeds without pain. Bandel is tapping into that ancient lineage but applying it to the modern emotional landscape. He's arguing that we've been brainwashed to think that a good life is a comfortable one. He's saying a good life is a competent one, and competence is forged in the fire of crisis.
So the takeaway is that emotional crisis isn't an interruption of your life. It is the process of your life. When you feel that leaden weight in your stomach, you shouldn't see it as a stop sign. You should see it as a battery that needs to be plugged in. You take that lead, transform it into fuel, and use it to drive toward whatever it is you truly desire.
Exactly. You move from being a victim of your circumstances to an adventurer in your own story, like the oak tree risking its seeds for a new forest. You gain by venturing. The crisis is just the environment where your will is tested and proven. It's not about enduring the pain until it stops. It's about mastering the crisis until you're fulfilled.
It really shifts the focus from "why is this happening to me" to "what is this enabling me to do?" By the end of this stage, the goal is to have a life that is bold, balanced, and, above all, alive. It's an invitation to stop avoiding the storm and start learning how to sway with the gale.
And that's the real beauty of the OAK Matrix framework. It doesn't promise a life without storms. It promises that if you embrace the duality of fear and desire, you'll become the kind of person who can thrive because of them, not just in spite of them. It turns life into a series of triumphs rather than a series of escapes.
If you found these insights on transforming emotional pain into personal power useful, consider recommending this exploration to someone currently navigating their own storm.